Okay, I think that's just about everybody admitted, so I'll make a start and say welcome everybody to this first meeting of my Facebook group, or our Facebook group. It's a great pleasure to be talking to you all from, unfortunately not Queenstown, which is behind me, but Auckland. It's almost as cold up here. So I would like to give a presentation of approximately 20 minutes or so, and then the remaining time, which is a total of 40 minutes, to then devote to questions and answers. Okay, so without further ado, I'll start my presentation. Here we go. Okay. First of all, I'd like to make this the first of several talks around the subject of low carb, healthy fat eating, ketogenic eating, maybe on a monthly basis, and certainly some subjects that I find interesting, but also subjects that others would find interesting. Please let me know what you'd like me to talk about, and then we can hopefully do some more sessions. To be clear, this meeting is not meant to be in any way medical advice, and the same applies to the Facebook group. Medical advice really is the domain of patient and health advisor. This talk is really just an overview, as is any information that's given on the Facebook page. So, over the latter half of my medical career, I've started to realise the importance of nutrition, importance in terms of human health, and in particular how advice we're given can affect wellness, disease states, as well as lifespan longevity. I've also become fascinated by the nutrition advice we've been given over the last 50 years or so, and the impact that has had on healthcare across the Western world. So I'm getting some oh, we go. During my career, I never received any nutrition advice that I recall at medical school. And during my career, I've then had to go to the internet to download information for people, produce my own handouts, or if I was fortunate enough to be able to refer to a dietitian, dietitians are few and far between, as we know. And so this is really a big fail in medical education as far as I'm concerned. And I think this probably continues to this day as well. Now my talk is about this. This is the healthy food pyramid, something we're probably all familiar with. At the bottom we're supposed to be eating breads, cereals, fruits and vegetables. And as we ascend, more lean meat, less dairy, fish and poultry, dried beans, nuts and eggs. And as we get to the top, lesser amounts of fats and oils, salt, sugar and alcohol. But my talk is also about this. This is the fattening of New Zealand between 1977 and 2012. And you can see from this graph that in 1977 approximately 10% of the population were obese. 2012 it's approaching 30%, and now we're over 30%. The third fattest country in the OECD. So my talk is about reduced carbohydrate intake leading to better health. And when I do this, or we do this with patients, we actually see that we can improve or reverse some medical conditions. We can reduce medication. We can help with weight loss. And we actually see results, which helps us as health providers to actually be more content in our work. We see people eat themselves healthy, therefore they improve their quality of life as a result, and maybe even live longer. So an overview of tonight's presentation. I'm going to start with a few notes about carbohydrates, fat and protein, then some facts about fats, the background to the low-fat diet which we've all adopted over the last 50 years or so, and consequences of the low-fat diet, some information about low-carb, healthy fat eating, and perceived risks of increased fat intake, and then finally some news and some benefits of LCHF. So a few notes about carbohydrates, fat and protein. Carbohydrates known as carbs, sugars, starch. Starch is actually long chains of glucose, which is a good storage form for glucose. And many foods or drinks are sources of densely packaged carbohydrates, if it's Coke, chips, pasta, potatoes and rice. But a very important fact is this, that we do not actually require dietary carbs to function normally. We make our own internally or use internal stores. Now, carbs are broken down to glucose, and glucose then stimulates the release of insulin to keep the glucose in the blood at a healthy level. And what we see in many people, that over time, when we're constantly and chronically exposed to carbohydrates, people become resistant to the effect of insulin and develop insulin resistance, which in itself gives rise to a whole lot of other health conditions. Trying to get the next slide. There we go. A few notes about fats, which one might call lipids, might call oils, might call cholesterol. The terminology I find very confusing, and it's really the greasy substance of food that we're talking about. Now, all these substances are essential for vital organ function, cell membranes and hormones, but they do not turn into sugar and have absolutely no effect on blood insulin levels. We can use the fat breakdown products known as ketones as fuel for the body, for the brain and for muscles. And fat has a reputation for making us fat, but in fact this is not true. It is the carbs that make us fat, unless we eat massive amounts of fat, which most of us can't and won't do. Proteins, they're important for structure and regulation of body tissues and organs. And again, protein does not increase blood sugar, and it therefore has no effect on insulin. Now, this next slide, facts about fats, is actually quite colourful and quite complex, so just bear with me please. There's a key of red items which are bad fats or thought to be bad fats, and green items which are good fats and thought to be good fats. So for example, you go to your doctor and you want a cholesterol level done. Well, in actual fact what you get is a series of different measurements. It starts with your total cholesterol, which some people find very disconcerting when it's above normal. Other people don't worry about that, and there's a lot of contention about what is a safe level, but generally speaking, cholesterol lower than 10 is regarded as safe in my opinion, and lots of other people would agree with that. Other people, lots of doctors, will have a fit if it's above 5. Triglycerides, we know that triglycerides when elevated increase the risk of heart disease and stroke. This is fact, and that's one form of bad fat. LDL, with the so-called bad cholesterol, again there's a lot of debate about whether or not it truly is bad, but there's enough controversy there to say that it is regarded still as bad cholesterol by many people. HDL is your good cholesterol. The higher this is, the better, and everybody agrees that this is a fact that's true. Now, fats also exist in liquid and solid forms. So you have your saturated fat, which are usually derived from animal fats. So your butter, your cheese, your lard, suet, things like that. And again, some people would contend that they were unhealthy. Others would say they were healthy or don't cause a problem. And I believe they're not important to health. Monounsaturated fats include your oils such as olive oil, and everyone would agree that is a good oil to be using. Whereas the polyunsaturated fats or oils are those that you get in the supermarket, your canola oil, your corn oil, etc. Now these are fats that are cold pressed but then altered in a factory, so they last longer and they can be heated to higher heat. Not natural. Okay, now evolution of the low-fat diet. It really starts with this man here. His name was Ancel Keys, and he was a researcher who at the end of the 1940s studied groups of middle-aged men and noted that the higher their cholesterol level, the more likely they were to die of heart disease. He then went on to propose the diet heart hypothesis, which still exists to this day. And that states that increased saturated fat in the diet raises your cholesterol, which I think most people would agree that does tend to happen. And then he said that went on to produce heart disease. And that's an area that I don't personally believe in, and that's the whole LCHF keto movement don't believe in either. Now, in 1958, he then went on to initiate the 7-country study, which was a multinational study of over 12,500 middle-aged men living in rural communities. But there was really a very poor association between cholesterol and heart disease, and there were numerous flaws in this study, although it was regarded as a landmark study. Now, the American Heart Association came on board in 1961 and declared that the best scientific evidence of the time strongly suggests Americans reduced their risk of heart disease by reducing saturated fat. Now this was driven by personalities, incredibly forceful personalities such as Ansel Keys and his connections within the scientific community as well as politics. And that is why the 7-country study was adopted so readily, because of his input. At the time, the President of the United States had a series of heart attacks, and so there was also a very strong drive from government and the health department to try and find a cause and remedy the rising incidence of heart attacks in the United States and the Western world. In 1977, the US Department of Agriculture introduced its dietary guidelines and food pyramid, and this spread across the continents and was adopted by many health authorities, including here in the South Pacific. And at the same time, the American Heart Association recommended lowering intake of saturated fats and replacing them with polyunsaturated fats. Now, if you reduce saturated fats, what does that mean? It means food tastes bland, and you have to replace it with something. And the only thing you can replace food with is carbohydrates. And I remember back in '77, when I was a bit younger, a letter coming through the letterbox talking about animal fat being bad and eggs being bad. 1 egg a week if you're lucky, otherwise you're going to get sick. And of course, if you then take away fat, you open up the market to unrestricted carbs. In other words, there's an explosion of foods now that were low fat, but obviously increased in carbohydrate intake. And what happens when you get unrestricted carbs? Well, you see this graph that I showed earlier. The world gets fatter, at least the Western world. And so you get obesity. Now, with obesity, you get conditions such as metabolic syndrome. That is where people get fat around the middle, they get high blood pressure, they get fatty liver, and eventually pre-diabetes and eventually diabetes, and maybe other conditions as well. Some people would even regard dementia as a type 3 diabetes. And so what happens? You get obesity leading to these other medical conditions, a massive increase in expenditure and healthcare requirement to the point that the system either collapses or something needs to change. Now, the effects of carbs or glucose on the body, well, we know they're broken down to carbs, the starch are broken down to glucose, but only a very small amount of this is used for energy. The rest is stored as glycogen in the liver and the muscle, and any excess after those stores are full is converted to fat via insulin. Now, as I mentioned before, prolonged carb exposure leads to insulin resistance, and this causes raised blood sugar or raised glucose. Now, we know raised glucose is a toxin. We see this in diabetes, where you get kidney failure, you get early heart disease, early strokes, the peripheral nerves stop working, visual problems and blindness, and limbs get chopped off. So I would regard carbs as being bad energy. How does low carb work? On this very basic principle that we do not need external sugar, starch or carbs to function normally, we make all we need. So therefore there is no reliance on outside glucose for energy. Fat is used for energy, either fat that is eaten or fat that is stored. And even if we have just a small amount of peripheral fat, we have a huge supply of energy there which we can use when we're not burning carbs. Now, as I mentioned, fat is broken down to ketones, and then ketones are used to fuel the brain and the muscles, and very, very effectively too. We're eating to stay full for longer. That's really the other thing about this, with foods that keep you full for longer, rather than foods that you digest and 5 minutes later you're hungry again. So I'm very quickly going to go through a list of foods to eat with LCHF eating. It's a long list, but just very quickly go through. So here we have all meats. You basically can eat any meat you like in its natural form. All seafood is good, especially oily fish, so you get your omega-3s. Eggs, any number that you like. Dairy, full cream cheese, full cream milk, fatty cheese, butter, cottage cheese, Greek yogurt. And then vegetables, essentially anything that grows above the ground. Berries, really the only fruit that we should be eating. Fats and oils, your olive oil, your macadamia, lard, butter, ghee, coconut oil. Nuts and seeds, really anything except peanuts and cashews. And then drinks are along the bottom. Now, foods to avoid will be fairly self-explanatory. Really, you're looking at your starchy foods, so your rice, potatoes, ice cream, French fries, soft drinks. Fruit really should be a treat, not as a regular staple, and even less so for dried fruit, which is a more concentrated form of carbohydrate. And then fats and oils, you've got margarine, corn oil, sunflower, canola. These are all, as I mentioned, made in a factory. Why would you want to eat those? Why not use something natural like olive oil? And drinks vary in content of carbohydrates. Dairy, again, anything low fat has more carbs in it. Condensed powdered foods, regular yogurts, I would avoid all these. Meat and fish, really you're talking about coated and battered, highly processed, ready meals, marinated in sugar cured. And then fast food would be fairly obvious again. And sauces that we use to cook with often are fortified with sugar to make them taste better. And then a list of other foods at the bottom. So just a little bit more about low carb eating. Really what we're trying to do is reduce or avoid the big five, that is bread, pasta, potato, rice, and fruit or starchy vegetables except berries. We're eating more animal fat and more meat, but more fat relative to meat. And we adapt. I often get asked by patients, what about my sweet tooth? What about bread and potatoes? I love them. In actual fact, this tends to wane because when you're full and your appetite is sated, you're not thinking about food as much, and you actually don't want to be eating all those unhealthy foods. And so it becomes less of a problem for most people. There are degrees of carb reduction. 50 to 100 grams roughly is the LCHF range, and ketogenic eating is, generally speaking, less than 20 grams a day. Monitoring, I tend to advise an app such as MyFitnessPal, which is free, helps you to record your macros, your protein, your fats and your carbohydrates, just to give you an idea of how to get of what you're taking in when you're first starting out, and encourage people to read labels to count the carb or be aware of the carb content, not the sugars. And dietdoctor.com, a fantastic online resource, not funded by any third party, only by subscribers, but there's lots of free information there in terms of meal plans, videos, documentaries, recipes, and it's constantly updating too. So who should not do strict LCHF diet without experienced medical input? You're looking at people with diabetes, kidney impairment, heart disease, pregnancy and breastfeeding. Some of the side effects of very low carb eating include headache, constipation, keto breath and leg cramps, and these are usually only lasting a few days when you start out and readily remedied, say for example with Panadol, laxative, peppermints and some extra salt. Rarer side effects include keto flu, rash, palpitations and hair loss. And I've only really seen palpitations which are usually in the form of a benign heart flutters, again usually only lasting a few days. But if you were to get them, you'd obviously consult your GP about that. Initial measurements, baseline, this is what I tend to do, baseline weight and height and blood pressure and blood tests to make sure we're not missing anything. Monthly follow-up tends to be monthly, again with further measurements. Gauging carbohydrate intake, especially the last 3 meals, is quite useful to find out what people are taking, and as well as looking at their apps. Bloods is required. And then ongoing advice and support, really wanting to check the variety of food, that people aren't getting bored eating too many eggs, and that there's variety in what they eat. Do you need to increase their carb restriction, or do they need to consider fasting, depending on what you're trying to achieve? So a quick note about the perceived risk of low carb healthy fat eating. Obviously you're increasing more animal or saturated fat, so people are automatically going to be concerned, what about my cholesterol, what about my bad cholesterol, what about heart attacks and strokes? And this is one fact. Numerous studies have shown that diets containing saturated fat are safe. Another fact is that numerous studies have shown that lowering saturated fat intake or substituting saturated fat with polyunsaturated fats does not improve mortality rates and has little effect on the heart attack or stroke rates. In other words, this is safe to do. It's probably a talk for another time. There's a lot more information there, and these are just very general statements due to necessity of time. So I'm nearly finished. Just a couple of headlines. The first is that Diabetes UK and Diabetes Australia now accept a role for the low-carb diet in diabetes management. Another news flash, US authorities now have no upper limit to the daily recommended intake of cholesterol. And the benefits, type 2 diabetes improvement or reversal, weight loss, reversal of fatty liver, improvement in blood pressure, irritable bowel, migraine, infertility and chronic fatigue. And I don't know a drug that can do all this. The take-home messages are these. We do not need dietary carbohydrates to function normally. The low-fat diet has made us fat and made us sick. Fat can't make you fat, carbohydrates make you fat. Low carb eating is easy to understand and gets results. It is sustainable and all nutrients are included, and that's a really important fact. These are free tools and free to use forever. And beware, low fat or fat free means carbs, sugar, starches. And I can think of only 4 groups that benefit from the reduced fat, increased carbohydrate diet. That is the grain industry, the cooking oil industry, the diet industry, and Big Pharma. So just where to find out more. I love to talk about this, so you're more than welcome to contact me. I'd love to talk about it. Dietdoctor.com, mentioned that already. The Magic Pill or Fat documentary, 2 online or downloadable documentaries that are well worth watching and cover this whole subject. What the Fat is a New Zealand-based book by Grant Schofield, Karen Zinn and Craig Roger from AUT in Auckland. Talks about the science, talks about how to do this, and gives some useful recipes as well. The Big Fat Surprise and Good Calories, Bad Calories are written by 2 exceptional investigative journalists. The internet is obviously a valuable source, and certainly some Facebook groups hopefully as well, some of which you may have seen. So with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to me, and hand over to the group now for any questions that you may have for myself or anyone else who's able to answer them. So over to the panel.
I wanted to know, if I get my Fitness Pal, what macros do I put in, or how do I work it out?
Okay, I should have covered that a bit more. It's actually very user-friendly. There's a number of ways. One is just to scan the barcode when you go to the supermarket. MyFitnessPal has a vast database, not only from New Zealand but other countries as well. And so you can just go to the supermarket, scan the barcode, it'll tell you what's in there. Or you can put it in manually based on what you see when you're at the supermarket, or you can estimate how much you're having. Say you might weigh out possibly some foods, and you can see what that's made up of. It calculates it for you.
Do I aim for like a certain percentage of protein or fat, or?
When you're first starting out, I wouldn't get too scientific about it, to be honest. I think I would look at trying to get the carbs down in the first instance and seeing where that goes. If you use Diet Doctor, for example, there's an app that goes with that if you subscribe, and with that app, it gives you the breakdown of the macros when you cook those recipes. But the other thing I'd also say about Diet Doctor is I don't get funded by them. I've got no financial interest in them. But if you subscribe for about 15 New Zealand dollars a month, the first month is free. What that means is you sign up, you can watch all the videos, get all the recipes, as many as you like, and then you can cancel the subscription, and it costs you nothing. And they readily accept that. So that's a useful thing to know, that you can get all the information without having to pay anything for it. Okay, so you've got lots of recipes and an app, as I say.
The only other thing I want to know is my husband's an insulin-dependent type 2 diabetic. So if I'm changing the meals for the family, do I need him to be supervised under the doctor?
Most definitely. And really, you'd really want to be going to a doctor who is familiar with low-carb, healthy fat eating or ketogenic eating. Most doctors would say, oh, it's a fad, don't do it, it's dangerous, da-da-da. And I would totally disagree with that. And I've had some good results with patients who've type 2 diabetes and also some with type 1 diabetes. So, I'm not trying to promote myself, don't take that the wrong way, but it's about going to someone who can advise you, and you need to find someone local who can advise you, who's not going to automatically poo-poo it and tell you not to do it. Because no way should you be doing this without medical advice. No way. Yeah,
cool. And won't have a fit over how much fat he eats.
Yeah, but that's because we've been told that fat is bad, you see. Fat, the numbers actually improve quite often when you eat more fat. Your cholesterol can go down, your LDL might go up, might go down. If you go keto, your triglycerides normalise. Now, the only thing that's ever been shown really is that the higher the triglycerides are, the more at risk you are of a heart attack or stroke. And that was totally ignored back in the 60s. So there's a whole lot of stuff that went on at that stage to formulate the way we eat now. Even I still, when I see someone's cholesterol come back high, it's my instinct to say, oh my goodness, that's high. When in actual fact, I have to correct myself because of what I've learned and what I'm hearing, you know. There's this huge internal bias that we all have based on what? I would say not in anything significant.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add to what you've just said there. Can everyone hear me or not?
Yes, can hear you.
Yep, cool. Your comment about the when you increase animal fats and things and your cholesterol looking much better. My husband and I were both, I was basically diabetic. He was pre-diabetic. We were both overweight. We went to an LCHF and went for a while keto. We also did fasting. And we eat a lot of saturated fat now, and this is for Marie especially. Our numbers have changed radically. My triglycerides were getting quite high. I was getting over the 2s. I'm now, I think, 0.5 triglyceride. My HDL used to be about 1. I'm now 2.6. However, just be aware, LDL, and you touched on this briefly, Marcus, LDL is not a measured actual number. It is a calculated number from a formula. Therefore, our LDL, because we have such high HDL and things, our LDL actually has gone higher. So I'm actually sitting at a 4.6 LDL. But if you look at that, which everyone would go, oh my God, that's really bad, you're going to die. No, it's not, because if you look at my ratio of triglyceride to HDL, I'm 0.2, which you need to be under 2 for that. So you need to, like Marcus is saying, you need to really go to a doctor who knows, because when I went to my doctor with saying we'd changed to high saturated fat, he was like, oh, you guys are going to be basically going to die and your cholesterol is going to be horrendous. And it wasn't. So yeah, so just adding to that, Marie, that get a good doctor. And if you can't, go to Marcus, because he sounds like he knows what he's doing. That was all I wanted to add.
Yeah, look, I just want to add to that as well, Tracy. The reason the LDL goes up is because the LDL consists of running out of time shortly.
Fluffy or small particle.
Correct. Yeah. So I mean, basically, there's 2 parts of LDL. The good part and the bad part. What happens is when you do LCHF, the good part goes up, so the total number increases. In actual fact, it's not as bad as it seems, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
We know. Yeah.
And that's the problem we have at the moment, is there's a very simplistic view of it used in New Zealand. Like they just look at the LDL. Like in America, they actually can get measurements of the particle size in your LDL to see, is it the good fluffy or is it the small particle glycated? We can't get that in New Zealand. I asked for it and they wouldn't do it. So this is one of the problems, is people are giving the wrong information.
The other thing is that people admitted to hospital with heart attacks, most of them have a normal LDL. So how relevant is LDL in terms of risk of heart attack? You know,
interestingly, I've looked in the research myself, and what they find is the people with the lowest LDL actually have the highest morbidity.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks, Tracy. Anyone else have any questions? As I say, we have a total of 40 minutes. I'm estimating about another 10 minutes or so to go. So if anyone's got any questions, fire away.
Marcus, am I coming through?
Yes, I can hear Kevin.
Just a question about keto and LCHF. You've sort of used them interchangeably.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you would talk in terms of whether you see one as a sustainable diet and another as a sort of an intervention diet, or do you believe that ketos are potentially a lifestyle?
Absolutely, without doubt. There's no reason not to do that. It's not like, you know, I mean, if for example, you have type 2 diabetes and you do keto and you reverse your diabetes, if you go off keto, your diabetes comes back. So in that regard, that is certainly sustainable and necessary, unless you want to go back on pills. But there is no reason why you shouldn't be keto indefinitely and live a healthy life. You know, you're improving so many parameters of health, maybe both in terms of weight, but also biochemical markers, that it's working, it's good, and there's no reason to change. Yeah, there's a tendency to use LCHF and keto interchangeably, and maybe I should review that in my next talk, but I believe it to be sustainable, And there's a lot of people say, oh, it's a fad diet, it doesn't last, you know. And there was an article written, or there's a commentary written by the team down in Otago a few years ago saying, oh, there's only studies gone as far as 6 months, but now we've got people in America gone as 3.5 years, reverse diabetes, taken away medication, you know, and remitting diabetes. In other words, not just improving it, but improving it beyond all doubt. So we know it's sustainable, but it takes motivation in the sense, if you don't want to do it, it's not going to work. And it does take people who want it to work for it to work. Now, that might sound obvious, but, you know, it works for people. It works for me. And I'm happy just carrying on like this. And in the people, in the people it works for, it works very, very well. But they've got to make that mental switch. They've got to say, well, I'd rather not have the pills and do something dietary-wise. There are people who just prefer to be on pills to make life easier. You can't do anything about that. So I hope that addresses your question, Kevin.
Thank you very much. That's great.
Thank you.
Just adding to your comment then about the fad diet thing, what's fascinating is actually the modern diet that we're eating is actually the fad diet. If you think about it, that actually what our grandparents ate was actually very LCHF or keto to a large degree. They didn't eat all the time. They didn't eat 6 times a day. They ate less processed food. So in actual fact, is not the modern food pyramid the fad diet? Just as a way get people thinking.
Yeah, that's a good thought, actually. I like that. You know, they said that, you know, the breakfast was your most important meal of the day. Well, it was back in the day because you had to survive all day on it. So you had your eggs and bacon and your lard, you know, and you kept going all day because of the fat and the protein. It's no longer the most important meal of the day unless you're marketing cereals. And yeah, no, it's important to realise what happened before in our grandparents. Our grandparents and great-grandparents weren't, as a group, fat people.
Hi, Marcus. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, I can.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's Katrina. Hey, sorry, I missed most of that because I couldn't figure out how to get to hear you. So I take it you'll record it and put it on the website.
Yeah, if everyone's happy with that, I'll put it on after we're done here onto the Facebook page, or a link to it anyway.
Oh, perfect. Hey, as an absolute beginner and have really only got on to this a lot more from your website, I've got the What the Fat cookbook, but I actually haven't got their book. For someone like me that's absolute beginner, would you recommend that as my first go-to?
I think it's good to read. There's a lot of interesting and useful stuff in there, and I definitely would endorse it. If you want it perhaps a bit more practical or a bit more choice, because it's constantly updated, I'd go to dietdoctor.com as well. I'd do both, because in What the Fat in the back there's a lot of scientific evidence. They talk about why things have happened the way they have over the last 50 years and why there's such a good way to live and eat. So definitely read it, but if you want even more choice and variety and information, go to dietdoctor.com.
Yeah. It was interesting hearing you say it was, you know, obviously good value, because one of those things is that you're always a bit worried about subscribing to these overseas sites, but obviously lots of people have, and it's all good.
It's the number one
Thank
site.
you for that.
It's the number one site in the world, and truly, it's not. There's no third-party advertising. It's all just by subscription, and you just look at the videos and the people that are talking, and it's definitely a good thing.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we are sort of shortly running out of time, so I hope this has been useful for people. And as I said, I'd like to do more of these, and possibly even have some guest speakers as well. So, you know, if anyone is interested in suggesting topics, please let me know, and let me know if it has been useful, and then we can move forward with this, because this platform of imparting knowledge and experience is so easy to do, and I think gets to so many people that I think you know, we should be using it.
No, it's been very good
Thank
what
you,
you've given
Marcus.
tonight. Yeah, thank you. Hey, just a question. Are you going to cover into fasting a wee bit as well with these? Or
Oh, yeah.
because it is a very good conjunct kind of method.
Oh, most certainly, yeah. No, it's going to be fast. It's going to be, I think, all the sort of areas of LCHF, from maybe how to get started, resources, fasting, different types of strategy, as it were. And then probably some anecdotes. Some. I had a patient today saying, "Look, do you want me to come and present myself as a case study?" I think that'd be really good. So things like that, people's experiences and support.
Hi, Marcus. I'd just like to say thanks. This
Yeah,
is
thank
just
you
so
very much, Lee.
exciting. So I've been waiting for this to happen for a long time. So I'm really excited that you're getting it underway.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's quite exciting when you start watching type 2 diabetics reverse their diabetes and taking them off medication. So yeah. And I think for all the practitioners out there, have a practice on yourself, because even your own health it's very beneficial.
Yeah.
So I haven't met anyone that it hasn't worked for yet.
No, thanks, May.
Thanks, Marcus.
Oh, I think there's something on the chat here which I haven't seen, so I'm trying to learn how to use this. So look what we've got here. I'm not sure
Okay,
how to overcome... Yeah, sorry, go on.
Sorry, since there's silence, I was just going to ask something. I noticed in one of the foods you said that you shouldn't have was dried milk powder. Now, why is that? Because we actually use the whole milk powder to make our yogurt and cream cheese with bottled cream, because it's the cheapest way of getting it. And my understanding is at certain times of the year anyway, milk is basically made, that we buy is made from powdered milk, because obviously cows don't produce milk all the time. So why did you say that? I'm very interested in that.
Excuse me. I think it's more of a generalisation, just to be aware of concentrated and powdered foods. I don't know if that applies to all milk powder. Probably doesn't, actually. But also the other thing is that milk powder, when it's reconstituted, is milk. And milk in itself has a fairly high carbohydrate intake. So just have to be a bit aware of not of measuring how much you're taking in.
Yeah, that's why we, when we make our yogurt and cream cheese, we basically get all the, I forgot, what's it called? The stuff that comes out. The yellow stuff, I've forgotten the name. We get as much of that out as, the curd, that's right. Yeah, curd and whey. We get that out as much as possible. We give it to our roses outside. But yeah, we basically drain it to get rid of the whey, which obviously is sugar, and leaving a very, very thick yogurt. Because it's the problem we have at the moment with, if you buy cream cheese or you buy yogurts, they've got all this extra stuff in them. But yeah, no, that's okay. That's cool to know. So it's more because obviously milk is lactose, which is sugar, that you were worried about, I presume.
Yeah, that's how I understand to be. Hey, I think we might get cut off in a second because it's just about the 40-minute mark. So if we do, I'd like to thank everybody for taking part. But if we're not cut off, if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to ask. Okay.
Maybe.
Well, I'll say goodbye from Queenstown then. And
I was going to say something, Marcus. Maybe one of the things we could do at one session is people could recount their favourite recipes.
Absolutely, yeah.
LCHF recipes. I've got a lovely chicken and leek one.
Yes, that sounds good. Okay, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, send me ideas. I'll we can do that. And maybe we can even get a bit longer time on the Zoom, which would be nice,
And maybe cover carnivore as well?
Yeah, I know. I'm not really into carnivore. Now, that shouldn't stop us talking about it. But it's not really... I don't really get it. I get LCHF or keto because I think that's the way humans evolved. I don't know if they evolved to be carnivores. But again, we should have that discussion. I'm not discounting it. I just don't get it at the moment. Because I think LCHF or keto is the best thing.
I think it reflects for example, during winter times when, humans went north, they would not have had plants. So they would have been carnivore for periods of times. It depends on how strict you are. Some people are stupidly religiously strict about it. But if you actually look at some of it, it's actually reflecting man's history.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, some people inadvertently are carnivore anyway. I know Tim Noakes, who's basically the father of LCHF keto from University of Cape Town. He doesn't eat much in the way of vegetables or fruit. He just eats meat. And, that's essentially carnivore. I don't have a problem in not eating veggies, perhaps, but you do have to be careful that you're getting enough nutrients in your diet. And we know that it's scientifically shown that you get enough nutrients if you do keto. But one just has to be aware of the fact that some vegetables are actually good for you and probably should eat our veggies, except the starchy ones.
Yeah, and also being aware of the nutrients that require fat to be uptaken, which is obviously a problem with the whole low-fat movement, is many people are eating a wide range of vegetables, but none of the nutrients got uptaken because they had no fat to transport it.
Exactly.
So it is a real problem, and it's great what you're doing.
Thank you.
I think one of the nice things from my perspective is that I don't feel that LCHF is a diet. It's just a different way of eating, and it's easily sustainable. And the other thing is the food tastes so much better. With butter and all those good things and cheese and wonderful.
Yes, it's very easy to convince your partner to eat it when it's so delicious.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle, not a diet.
And you don't.
I think that's what you want to call it, Richard. And you don't eat too much with it either. You eat what you need, essentially. But I'm going to finish up with a quick recipe, right? There's a really nice smoothie or frozen yogurt. You get 3 parts of Greek yogurt, 1 part of heavy cream, a teaspoon of vanilla essence, a handful of berries and a handful of mango. Blitz it up. There's your smoothie or your frozen yogurt. It's delicious, and the kids love it too.
Marcus, when the first time you do a Zoom chat, you don't get restricted to the 20 minutes or the 40 minutes. It can go forever, but the subsequent one is restricted. So Zoom forget that you're doing the free one, but the next time it doesn't keep going.
Right. Oh, well, that's fantastic. Okay. Well, I'll be here all night if you want.
Yeah, so there's no restriction the first time. So if you're waiting for it to end, it's not going to.
Oh, good. That's wonderful.
So could we do a talk around and just see where everyone's at? What are people doing?
Yeah. Do we want to go around the room, as it were, or people just talk freely? I hate that round the room thing. So yeah, shall I start? I have been doing LCHF keto for about a year, 18 months. Thanks to my friend Richard, who's on the screen there, who went for lunch with him and his wife, and he handed me some cheese and some salami, and it was like, what are you doing? You can't be eating all this. It's not good for your cholesterol. And lo and behold, with a bit of research, because he told me this cholesterol was never better since doing that, I then went on and researched things and got onto LCHF keto and have not looked back, both in terms of weight loss myself and what I've been doing with patients. And it's so rewarding. You actually go to work and make a difference, and you're taking pills away, you're reversing disease. I've got a lady, she's 70, she lost 70 kilos. She was on 65 units of insulin. She stopped that now. It's just been amazing, lost 32 kilos, and she's happy. And I'm happy. And I'm just very, very passionate about this because I've learned so much about it and seen just how we've been all misled, and how the world's got sicker. So I'm passionate about it, I'm doing it, and therefore that helps me, I think, advise people because I know some of the ins and outs, and I know I go up and down. When Richard and I get together on the weekend, my weight goes up. That's not because of what we eat, is it, Richard? It's those extra carbs in the liquid form. So, I understand how it works, and it's about advising people. But it's just so nice to be able to take stuff away, reverse stuff. It won't work for everybody. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if people want to do it, I'm happy to advise them, and it works. So that's me.
I know from my perspective, I originally started to try and lose some weight, but the other thing that was amazing was the improvement in so many of my my blood measurements that I'd get done on a regular basis, and it was quite dramatic, some of the improvements. And that was even though I was eating what I had learnt was bad, everything improved. And so, you know, why would you stop that? I also met a dietitian last year who is working down in Canterbury with diabetic children, and she's had amazing success at introducing them to quite aggressive keto diets, which has had a significant effect on the management of those kids. And I think that's now been rolled out from Canterbury all the way down to Invercargill. So, you know, it's not as though Marcus is the only one. There are lots of people who are now starting to understand this and making great gains for people doing it.
And just on the note of diabetes, I mean, diabetes means you don't handle sugar or glucose. Your body can't handle it. So why on earth are we giving people with diabetes sugar? It makes no sense whatsoever. Only to give them more medication to bring the sugar down, so they get fatter, get more medication to bring the sugar down further, then to give them insulin eventually, because they, you know, it just doesn't make sense. You know, enough from me. So we're all from Auckland or from all over the country?
I'm from Dunedin.
Cool.
I'm one of your patients.
Okay, cool.
I'm from Auckland. I live just along the road from where you practice.
Oh, right, cool.
I'm from Rotorua.
Excellent.
I'm from Ashburton. I could tell you a little bit about what we've been doing. I did a course through Precure. Always interested in nutrition and never quite did that well. My partner's type 2 diabetic, been on insulin for 20 years. He's lost 37 kgs and is now just on metformin, which is a huge improvement. Great improvements in energy, sleep, pain, mood. Yeah, just amazing. And I'm sort of the lightest and the smallest I've been since I was a teenager, which is really weird, being postmenopausal. So, yeah, so I trained as a health coach. Yeah, so yeah, just it's really good what you're doing, and I'm hoping that you've got some colleagues that are supporting you as well. You've probably got some that are criticising you, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. I know that, you know, in my we have regular meetings of peer review meetings or peer groups, and I know that my colleagues in that group are starting to prick up, because obviously I'm telling them about results I'm having. So we're not going to influence people by telling them what to do, but we're going to influence people by showing them what we can do and what has happened. And so that's, you know, we've got to do this by stealth. You can't be just saying, oh, this is what you should do, because doctors especially don't like to be told what to do anyway. But yeah, I mean, I've got some people like May who spoke before. She's a great doctor from West Auckland who's passionate about LCHF and keto. So if anyone's out that way and wants some help, go and see her. There's Lily Fraser in Mangere, you know, and there's not that many in Auckland. There's a guy on the North Shore, but I don't know his name. But, you know, we're trying to spread the word. We're trying to keep the momentum going, as it were. But, you know, you can't refute the results that we get. So just, Robin, just a question with your husband. Did he go through an LCHF doctor?
No, there aren't any in this area. Crikey. They're all just... yeah, in the dark ages.
How did he do it himself, did he?
Well, actually, he's just found a new doctor who's younger, and she said, have you got a health coach? And I thought, oh, how does she even know what a health coach is?
Yeah,
so she is interested, and she's going to be really supportive. So I hope she does stay. But yeah, they're few and far between around here. Anyone that
sees things in that way.
On the group page, I tried to put a list of lists of doctors who are LCHF keto friendly. So if you're looking for that, it should be somewhere on the group. I think it's on the topics page. The other thing I would say is this, that I'm more than happy to talk to other doctors. If you have a GP who says, oh, this is nonsense, dangerous, etc., then please send them my way. I'm more than happy to try and start dialogue with them and just sort of spread the word, because ignorance is bliss, I think. It doesn't help anyone either.
Can I just ask you experienced people, when you first started this, did you just cut down on those carbs that you outlined, Marcus, before? Did people just go straight into it? Like, how did people go about it? Because I think that, is it Caroline Zinn talked, when I was watching a YouTube video of her, talked about how you sort of get yourself into it a wee bit. And I just wondered what everyone else's experiences are that they could share without being too complicated and using huge big words.
Tracy.
Oh, sorry, I'll let someone else go.
I just started by stopping, like when we have meat and veg and potatoes or pasta or rice, just cut out the meat and veg and pastas and rice, just not the meat and veg, cut out the potatoes, the rice, the cut out the carbs, cut out the bread, just stop them, and then reevaluate. So for each week, take one thing out. Yeah, it sounds like a good idea to go.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say I did exactly the same. Just basically, cut out the bread and the potato, pumpkin, kumara, all those rice, pasta, all the obvious things. And when that started working, then I was reading as much as I could, read what the fat, and just went from there. The keto only came for me actually only 2 or 3 months ago. I just tried to do the low carb, healthy fat, and then gradually pushed it tighter.
For my husband. Oh, so who's going? Can I go?
I was just going to say, be kind to yourself. It's a big change, so just be kind and make mistakes, and then start again tomorrow.
The husband and I, when we started doing it, we actually did it, I think it was about 3 years ago now. We actually didn't know about the low carb, high fat at this point. What I actually heard about was the fasting. And so I actually found all the research, because I'm in the university space. And so I found all this research on fasting, and I started doing that. And we did it, we just basically straight off didn't have breakfast, and I don't recommend it. I would say to people, from our experience, the first 3 days were hell, because in our eating, in our eating window, we just were starved. Like, we basically were eating from 12 to 8 o'clock at night, and we were just absolutely starved. I've never been that starved, because of course we were glucose adapted. We didn't know how to use our fat. I mean, I was diabetic. I basically lived on glucose. So I personally would recommend people do like Jason Fung says, where you slowly bring, if you're going to do fasting, slowly bring your times together to adapt. Because if you do go cold turkey, it is hard. You definitely want to be doing it if you go cold turkey with a person to support you, because it is hard. But on the converse, we got through the horrible cold turkey in 3 days. We adapted, and then it was easy. So it was horrible that first bit, but we got through that stuff very quickly. I knew about the electrolytes and things like that. So what's one of the things we did do is, because most of the time keto flu and all those things are actually electrolyte imbalances, because you dump your fluid, which dumps electrolytes. And then we discovered the low carb from that, because obviously these two things go hand in hand. And then we researched. And just like Marcus was saying, we dumped all those things that weren't good for us. So, and the weight fell off. I lost 17 kilograms over 3 months. It just fell off. And to give people out there an idea, because I'm coming 50. You can't see me because I can't work out how to get my iPad showing my face, but I'm coming 50. Obviously perimenopause. I'm having all that fun. And I've been on many diets in my life. And one of the things I would say is you lose the weight and then you put it back on, and it was always bloody hard. Diets were hard. And we did this whole LCHF and fasting, and I was on a bike ride with the husband one day, and I said to him, you know what, I think someone's going into my cupboard and making my clothes bigger because this is too easy. You know, I can't actually be losing weight. It's too easy. And that's one of the things I'll say to people is it does just works. Like Marcus said, it's how we're meant to eat. And that's all I'm going to say. Hopefully that helps people.
I would also say that people vary in what they want to do. To different personalities do different things. So some people go hard out keto and get the headache and the flu or whatever. Do what you feel is best, not what you think you should do. And you know, your best friends are cheese, cream, and eggs and butter. So you know, when you cook your steak, cook it in cream and some mushrooms and add some butter to it. And don't worry, you're not going to gorge. You're just going to fill up with fat and protein, and you're going to stop because you're not going to want any more, and you're going to be feeling full for much longer than you would if you had your meat and 3 veg. So just start simply. Add more butter. Like if I'm cooking, say for example, I'm doing Monday night is chili night, right? So what we do is I cook up some chili. I cook it in ghee. Ghee is really good because you can heat it to high heat. It's clarified butter. And then at the end, I've thrown a big knob of butter just to enrich it more. But I don't eat much, and I'm full all evening. And I've noticed over recent times that I don't eat as much anyway, volume-wise. I can't eat as much. So little things like that, a bit more fat in the food will help with that. That's what I've found.
Yeah, I think one of the things for me, I mean, when I started it, I basically it was rice, bread, pasta, and potatoes that were the main things I gave up. But of course, you've got to replace them with something. And I think one of the really good things to do is go and plant some cauliflowers, because you know, I mean, I typically have mashed cauliflower instead of mashed potato, and plant some aubergines as well. I did a lasagna the other day, and I replaced the pasta with aubergine, and my son said, "Wow, this is really good." And this is from a 20-something who just typically grunts. So it was a particularly good response. So we eat a lot more cauliflower, and we eat aubergine or eggplants like we didn't before. And it's one thing taking some of the food out, but it's also what you replace it with. I'll also send Marcus I can't even remember where I got it, but it's a few pages of the different vegetables and fruits and meats and grains and how many carbs they've got. Have I ever shared that with you, Marcus?
I think you might have done, yes. Yeah. And there's
and
also... Sorry, go on.
It's quite a nice pictorial way to say, I should have that and I should have fewer of those.
Is that the same thing as David Unwin's done? David Unwin's a GP in the UK, and he basically classified carbohydrates in terms of glycemic index. In other words, how much effect they have on your blood sugar. And so he's got tables of different types of food, and just a helping of rice, how much carbs is in that versus potatoes. But either way, this whole visual representation of what you're eating is so valuable, so useful. The other tip I would have is having a list of foods or meals that you like, that you know will fill you up, and that are easy to prepare, so that you don't have to think at the end of the day, what am I going to cook tonight? You have a list there on your phone or on the fridge. It might be chili every Monday night or every second Monday night. Just so it makes life easier in terms of having something knowing what to cook without having to create an obstacle to threaten the cause, as it were.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Just really listen to your appetite. We've been ingrained with this whole idea of 3 meals a day, and when you change over to low carb and you're so satiated on fat, sometimes you just can't eat another mouthful. So it's kind of like realizing how much unnecessary eating we've been doing, especially we're not growing. You're not having babies anymore. As we age, our food requirements are much less than they would have been prior. So yeah, it's quite interesting how your appetite drops off and you're just not hungry anymore.
The only reason we have 3 meals a day is so people can sell us food.
Absolutely, gosh.
Okay. I think probably it's now around about time we might draw the meeting to an end, unless anyone's got any further burning questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and participating. I will try and do another one of these sessions in about a month's time. But please send me your requests of topics, and we'll just see where all this goes. But spread the word, I think, I think that's really the message, So I'll sign off for now, and I'll try and get this up or put a link up on the Facebook group shortly, okay? Good night from Queenstown. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.